You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Justice is Served here on Black Hollywood Live. My name is Chelsea Galicia. I'm an LA workers' compensation attorney here along with three fabulous co-hosts to bring you the latest in legal news. I want to start here. To my left is Mr. BJ Abron, who I'm so excited to. Everybody join me in applause. BJ was just sworn in yesterday at the next class of lawyers here in California. Found out he passed the bar, partied it up. That's why he missed last week. We will forget that because it is quite the accomplishment, and I remember the relief. So congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
Excited to have you here. And we have our law student, Nisha Vida. One day you will know that joy. She, for the time being, is a UCLA law student who is getting a dual degree, her master's in public policy. So you're going to be at this school thing for longer than the three of us were. She is also the co-editor-in-chief of the National Black Law Journal and in the Public Interest Law program. She was also born in South Africa and LA raised. Fascinating person. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
And last but not least, we have Shaka Smith, who, born in Miami, went to undergrad at Princeton Law School in D.C., where he did natural gas, healthcare law, and worked in the public defender's office. And he moved to L.A. to pursue acting and fitness modeling. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We've got quite an intense rundown for you today. A lot of follow-up on shootings, new shootings, sort of the landscape of legal news in America right now. So let's start off with Laquan McDonald. So you'll remember that he was the guy shot 16 times by a police officer. We showed the video. First I thought it was like last week, and BJ was like, no, that was 2 weeks ago. We were like the Walking Dead lawyers around here. So we showed that video that shows an officer driving down the street and then comes upon Laquan McDonald, who is not being threatening to any of the officers around, is kind of walking down the street, almost ignoring the officers, when this one particular officer, Jason Van Dyke, appears on the scene and less than 30 seconds later begins to unload his gun into Laquan McDonald. So he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, but now is out of jail. He, since Monday, has been released on bail of $1.5 million. Now, the first interesting thing about this was that last week, before the video was released, the judge denied bail and wanted to see the video first before deciding on the bail issue. So, Shaka, how do you think that seeing the video impacted the judge's decision about whether bail was going to be granted and the amount?
Well, I think that he did set bail at $1.5 million, so I think he acknowledged that there was some sort of, there was a gravitas behind the video. You know, this guy was shot several times. I think we heard a lot of statements prior to the video's release about the gruesomeness of the video, and I think the judge wanted to see how gruesome it was to see if he should deny bail altogether. And I don't think it showed the kind of, I mean, it was awful to see, but I don't think it showed the kind of gruesomeness the judge might have thought might have been on there, given the previous statement.
It wasn't quite gruesome, but it was just blatant.
But yeah, it just felt like it might be gruesome based on the comments prior.
I mean, what do you think would have needed to be on the video for the cop to deny bail?
Well, I always thought maybe a point-blank shooting might be more, but given the fact that there was some distance,
so
and
only if we would have seen blood, you think maybe the video would have been
I think that definitely factors into whether or not the impact it had on the judge. But once again, it was $1.5 million, so it was a high bail that was set, and the guy is not a flight risk.
Exactly.
And so I think that's what it comes down to: is this guy going to flee? Was it so gruesome that this guy might just dart.
And I think that's what you really want to look at when you're talking about whether someone should receive bail or not, is whether they're a flight risk, not necessarily whether you think that they are more likely to be charged and convicted with this crime. And so, personally, I'm not sure why he needed to see the actual video before he made that ruling. He heard the charges. He should have assessed the circumstances. This is a police officer. What's his likelihood of fleeing the country or whatever?
I think to some degree it goes hand in hand. If the video is such that you'll definitely be convicted, so gruesome, it's completely clear it's not defensible whatsoever, I think that raises your likelihood to flee.
I agree.
And so I think maybe he wanted to see, if there was any defensibility to this video.
To that point, his own attorney said about the video, when you see the video alone, it does not seem like a justifiable shooting.
Yeah.
So he's trying to say that circumstances beyond the view of the video make it less obvious that this was a justifiable shooting. So, but if you look at the video, it seems pretty
But he said
cut and
after
dry.
meeting with his client that it was defensible, that he felt it was completely defensible.
When I first read about this, I don't remember what news outlet it was, but the news outlet they showed the video and they kept sort of talking about this knife that Laquan had in his hand. He had this knife, he wouldn't let his knife go, and then even after he was shot, he didn't let the knife go. So perhaps somewhere in there it got factored in that he may have been a threat, or the officer may have felt threatened.
And with the
to
video,
me, that's such a stretch.
And with the video, we can see clearly, but we don't know exactly how far the officer was. We don't know how sunlight played a role. So, to me, should the officer be convicted based on the video? Yes. But do I think there could be defenses there that are plausible? Absolutely. So
I think that there are definitely some plausible defenses. Whether they'll whether they'll work or not is a different story.
Yeah.
But and I think actually, not statistically, it's been proven before that certain individuals, if you're carrying a knife and you're within a certain range, I think it might be 9 feet or something like that. If you're facing that person here, clearly this wasn't the case,
No.
but if you're facing that person that you're going to shoot, you're going to be able to stab them before they can get a shot off. So obviously during a trial, you'll hear, and don't quote me on the 9 feet, but it's somewhere near there. And so you'll see during a trial these types of things that come out, and you might have heard that, or these might have came out during the bail hearing or whatnot. I'm sure he made some type of viable argument to.
And it was they found drugs in the system, correct?
Yes.
think so.
Was it PCP?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like, who cares?
Oh, well, PCP, that's one of the drugs that you can continue to fight after you've been shot a few times. So I think that
But when you look at the video, he wasn't fighting anybody before he was shot. So I don't see what the drugs in this case have anything to do with anything.
And I think that would probably be my position, but I think it's defensible, the fact that he had this drugs in the system that typically makes someone able to resist even shots fired to the person.
So this part was interesting too. So in order to post bail, the officer, do I even need to call him officer anymore? He's been fired, right? Jason Van Dyke needed to post 10% of that, so that's $150,000, and he raised it through a GoFundMe page that his wife set up, and the Fraternal Order of Police, a local chapter, also helped raise the money. Do you think that says anything about police officers who are raising money for another officer who blatantly killed somebody?
So when I think about the people that I know that are in security and that are officers, I think they would look at the video and they would think about the PCP and they would think about the knife and they would look at the distance and they think about the fact that officers are first responders and dealing with all these crazy people, and they would say, okay, I understand why he shot him. Now, whether or not, it makes sense that he would shoot him 17 times, that's
16.
another story, or 16 times.
And I actually read somewhere that he was reloading the gun because 16 is
right.
all the bullets that there are. And so he was reloading and would have kept going, apparently, if it had not been for another officer who told him to stop.
I think that there's officers who would look at this and just think it's egregious, and I think there's officers who would look at this and find it justifiable.
And see, my take on it is that I'm not talking about 2 bullets or 2 shots. I'm not talking about 3 shots. I'm not talking about 4 or 5. I'm talking about 16 shots. That's not justifiable. And I don't care what your take is, if you're pro-law enforcement, if you're anti-law enforcement. I don't understand, and I personally, I think it's a problem if you have a view that this was in any way, shape warranted. Just have a problem with it.
But I do think there's something to be said for, if this was a family member that had committed the shooting and they said, to me, trust me, when everything comes out, you'll see I'll be exonerated, then I would believe that and I would support them. And I think the officers are doing that behind their officer who's now in trouble. They're going to trust that the circumstances must have led him. I'm sure they met with him and they know his story, and so I think they're believing that the circumstances will ferret out that he is not in any wrongdoing. So.
You might be absolutely right about that, but I just have a feeling that this is just the good old boys.
It's a bad PR move, but I think
it
you're
is.
right.
I mean, because the chief, if I'm not correct, he was the one who came out and said that this video was heinous and he couldn't even watch it. Is this correct?
Yeah.
Not a fellow, the chief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
All right. We will bring you the latest on, of course, the proceedings in that case. I believe he is going to be, I think the next, I can't remember where, like I said, Walking Dead around here. But I believe that the next step in this case is coming up soon. Before the end of the month, we'll have another development. All right. And then the shooting of Jamar Clark sparked a gathering of protesters. The Black Lives Matter movement gathered to promote awareness and seek justice for Jamar. And then we had white supremacists basically come armed. And when they were sort of called out for being there, like, what are you guys doing here? In this confrontation, they shot 5 participants in the Black Lives Matter movement protest. And for a while, we didn't know there were no arrests made.
Right.
Now there have been arrests made of 4 people. Some of the individuals had made a video before, or I guess it looked like they were on their way, perhaps, saying silly things like "stay white." So these 4 are being charged with assault and second-degree riot. So what does that mean, second-degree riot? We don't see that very often.
Yeah, so I think basically in that jurisdiction, if you were with 4 or more people and you go, basically you cause a rioted situation where there's a gathering of people, then you can be charged, and there's harm that is caused to victims in the crowd that are not part of your foursome or more.
Right.
Then you
Would
can
have
be
been
charged with
first
second
degree.
degree.
It's very interesting that the difference between first and second degree seems to be only the number of participants. So for felony, it's 10 people or more.
Yeah.
And for second degree, which is a misdemeanor, it's 4. And so they barely made it in because they had 4 people. We're showing one of them who... Scarcella is his name. I don't even know if I want to be saying this guy's name. Don't want to give him any more free press. But he apparently is accused of firing 8 shots, wounding 5 people. And the other 3 are also being charged with assault, and that's for
Second-degree riot.
Some people have asked, why no hate crime? Why no domestic terrorism? Why no attempted murder charges? Have you guys gotten to the bottom of why that might be?
It's a very simple answer. Look at the victims. That's it. It's the only answer.
And the aggressors.
And the aggressors.
I mean,
well, one thing let me tell you one thing that's interesting about the aggressors, because and I like that you phrase it as a white supremacist act. But all of these individuals weren't quite quote unquote white. One of them was Asian, and I think this tells a deeper story about what America does and how America creates in the mind and depicts certain people and creates not only just a culture that white people have, and not all, when I say white people, quote unquote, I don't mean all white people, but create this culture of white supremacy and how others buy into it. And when I say others, I mean even Latinos, even African Americans, and they buy into this. And so what you see is not just a white on black scene here. You see whites mixed with Asians here in this particular circumstance. And to me, I think that's very interesting and it's very deep, actually, when you actually stop to think about that.
Yeah, I think they do kind of set up that dichotomy where it's sort of like an us versus them, and then you start to kind of coalesce these different groups. But I did want to defend the city to some degree because they did say they didn't charge with a hate crime because the penalties for second-degree riot were higher. So they were the sentences for second-degree riot were higher.
do you think it would have been just good symbolically to charge with the hate
Exactly.
crime?
But if you're going for the bigger sentence, then I think that was a way to go. And then I think the prosecutor also mentioned that they are talking to the U.S. attorney about some sort of
Federal
federal
charges.
charges. So.
Okay. And then one of the reasons I saw that attempted murder charges were not filed is because where the victims were shot.
Yeah, the injuries did not sustain an attempted murder charge.
I don't agree with that, because the use of the deadly weapon doctrine clearly makes the use of a deadly weapon enough to show intent to kill.
But if I've shot at 10 people and I've shot all of their legs, every single one of them I shot below the knee, I don't think that's enough.
I think the
to show
likelihood of you causing death is extremely high.
So we're looking at manslaughter, but I don't think for attempted murder I have to want to kill you. And so I don't think if I'm shooting at 10 people and everyone's below the knee, I think it kind of shows I was going more to not for death, you know? So I think that's why the prosecutor said.
And so maybe these guys are really trained shooters and they just knew what they were doing. But that just triggered something in my mind, actually. What happened to police officers not shooting to kill? And all of these circumstances and these cases that we're talking about, these officers are literally shooting to kill. Mm-hmm. Why can't you shoot someone, like you just said, in this scenario, in the leg or in the foot, just to stop them from being from causing you any further pain or whatever?
So I was talking to my officer friends about this, and what I have been informed is that the leg is a very sort of small target. The chest is wide enough that if you're trying to disable someone, I mean, if you try to shoot at someone's leg, you may miss, right? Because it's a small target, or someone's arm, they're moving, they're small. So if someone's coming at you, which a lot of these cases, no one's coming at anyone. There's someone like in the distance, or they're running away or whatever. But in the circumstances where an officer is shooting, that's why they shoot for the chest, because it's a big enough target that you'll get a hit.
And see, to me, and like you said, in these situations, you don't see that threat that you would like to see, to say, hey, I shot him, this is why I shot him in the head, or this is why I shot him in the chest. So for me, and we were just talking about 3 random guys, and I don't know their background, but we're not talking about trained police officers here. We're talking about just regular guys. So when
they
you have
got
a trained,
lucky, basically, in not
Right.
shooting?
I think that's absolutely possible, but for the city, they moved very quickly on this, and it seemed like they were really proactive, and so I'm going to trust the prosecutor when he said the injuries didn't rise to the level, and I think we will hear what those injuries were in the coming months. But I was actually a little bit heartened by the last 2 stories with the murder 1 charge, and now how quickly they're moving here. At least with the way justice is being dispensed, I'm starting to see a change and a trend.
Well, because already in this case, remember, Jamar Clark died over a year ago, so there's already been a tremendous delay in justice in this case. It took a year for the officer to be charged. It took a year plus for the video to be released.
Yeah, the timing was
That's
egregious.
Laquan.
The timing,
That's Laquan,
Laquan.
Oh, God, see?
The timing was egregious.
No,
but
Laquan was
Laquan's video.
was just killed a few weeks ago.
No, the video was released.
Yes, that was released. Gosh, yes. I mean, some of these.
Yeah.
But that's a testament to how often this happened, that it overlaps and you just get confused over who's who.
of
It's
course.
just so many bodies, so many victims.
And I mean, absolutely no disrespect to the victims or the victims' family and not keeping these stories straight. But it is so overwhelming, the number of these stories that we cover, that it's no excuse to not keep them straight. But it's.
I just wanted to press a little bit more on the domestic terrorism idea, because during the University of Missouri situation where people were protesting and there was all this stuff going on, there were actual KKK members that came onto campus, and the administration refused to shut down the campus, even though these people had been putting out threats on Twitter. They'd been contacting students and threatening their lives. They were on campus. The KKK presence was on campus, and administration knew this. I mean, come on, KKK, like, how many people have they killed, right? So, but no domestic terrorism charges. They didn't even shut down the campus. And I was reading an article about this shooting, and it was talking about how since 9/11, there's been 2 times the number of people that have been killed by white supremacist groups than any kind of Muslim jihadi
And in fact,
person.
and I believe I
Yep.
read that same article where they took it a step further and even stated that even the police officers in these regions aren't concerned about Muslims. They're concerned about the white supremacists because they see how prevalent this is. And I think that this goes back to a number of episodes ago where we talked about, and I mentioned how media is the way that you really control a population. And so I completely agree with you that in this circumstance, maybe the charge that they came with or that they brought has a more harsh sentence. But I think the media is really playing a game, or we're playing a game with media here, because you're categorizing a number of people since 9/11 as terrorists, as domestic terrorists, and that word rings a lot of bell, and that word sticks. And so when you see all of these incidents dealing with white supremacy, why are we not labeling these people as terrorists?
It also affects how we police people, right? Because I think the federal government just released a policy saying that Muslim families are going to be watched in case like somebody becomes a terrorist or something like that.
Radicalized.
So we're actually creating all this extra policing of people, right? Sikh people who aren't even Muslim, they're another faith, but they wear the turban traditionally, get racially profiled, whether by officers or by just people on the street, After Paris attacks, people were getting beaten, innocent people. And so this sort of racialization of terrorism as being a brown thing also affects how we're policing people and how we're policing communities.
Yeah, it has a tremendous effect just on what we charge people with. Changes the narrative of how people are seen, for better or for worse.
Right.
And our country has failed. I don't know of any situations in which a white supremacist group or person has been charged with domestic terrorism. We had a similar conversation about this with Dylan Roof, who shot the individuals at the church. Same thing there, not charged with domestic terrorism. So we're, I guess, going to wait for the day when that happens, because it has not happened yet.
Right.
But isn't domestic terrorism an element of that to do with the ideology of the country as a whole?
I don't know.
When you're trying to kind of
it's politically motivated.
when you're trying to deconstruct the politics of the country.
What do you mean by that?
So if I'm committing violence because I want the United States to change a governmental policy, if I want the government to do something.
Yeah,
No,
these
no,
people
no.
were anti-government, or they want to go back to when the government had a segregated, things of that nature.
But that's not necessarily what a domestic terrorist is, and I'll just state, because growing up in Compton, I know that gang members are labeled as domestic terrorists now.
Oh, okay.
And so that label is not just applicable for a government motive.
Okay.
All right. Well, gosh, I wish that we could go on to a lighter story, but can't quite. Yet we have an officer facing trial now. He's first officer that is being tried in the death of Freddie Gray. So Freddie Gray was the 25-year-old guy that died earlier this year when he was handcuffed, both hands and feet, placed in the back of a police van that was driven, erratically. He went on a rough ride. Freddie Gray sustained a neck injury, spinal injury, and died a week later. All 6 officers involved have been charged, and they have decided to try them all separately. The first officer being tried is William Porter, who, if you're looking at the picture we have, that's the next story, is the guy on the upper right corner. He is one of 3 black officers involved in this case. The first to be tried, he is being tried for manslaughter, second-degree assault, misconduct in office, and reckless endangerment. Which of these, if any, do you think will result in a guilty verdict?
Well, I would definitely say manslaughter. Second-degree assault is a little bit tougher because it requires an intention.
Right.
And misconduct in office and reckless endangerment, I think, are almost gimmies in the situation.
Yeah.
And why I say second-degree assault requires intent is really what they're saying is because they did not strap this guy in, that's what caused the injury. And it's just going to be very difficult to prove that these officers intended to cause him injury by not strapping him in, unless one of the officers comes forward and kind of testifies against the other guys.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons perhaps why this officer is the first one. Perhaps prosecutors believe him to be the least culpable, and so he will provide testimony or evidence will come out in his trial that will point a stronger finger at other officers involved as a way to defend himself. And I mean, it's probably obvious to me, at least, that the reason he's being tried first is because he might be the least culpable. Or, the other hand, he may be the most culpable, and they want to set a precedence that there's been a conviction before, and so the other trials should follow.
Yeah.
Should we make anything of the order of these officers being tried?
I mean, I think the prosecutors always take strategies in these type of matters. Obviously, at this point, until the evidence comes out, we really don't know or can't confirm or deny what that strategy may be. But I think that definitely the involuntary manslaughter is probably the one that will stick because, like you stated, it doesn't require that intent element.
So I want to talk about the role of race in this particular case because both of the defendant and victim here are black. The jurors make up the same racial makeup of the city. There are 8 black and 4 white jurors who are going to decide this officer's fate. Do you think that he's going to get a fair trial based on the breakdown of the racial makeup in the city of Baltimore?
Well, I mean, it's not like people aren't going to know.
Well, yeah,
so
in
that's my
fact,
thing.
all of the jurors knew who Freddie Gray was when the judge asked them. They knew about him. I think everybody but one person that was questioned knew about the $6.4 million that the city paid to the family. So the question of a fair trial is obviously an important issue for both sides, right? The jury knows about this case somewhat, but that by itself does not disqualify somebody. It's only if their bias is such that they cannot, with an open mind, hear the evidence and weigh it and make a decision.
And oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think where race for the jury might come in is, if you're black, chances are you've been profiled or someone you know has been profiled, and chances are maybe there's been some kind of police aggression involved. But that doesn't necessarily mean, I think that everybody's going to have the same opinion. People are going to have different opinions. They're going to see facts differently.
And I think it'll be interesting with this case to see how it plays out. But the charges are very simple. Basically, they violated a police code that resulted in his death. And so manslaughter and misconduct in office and reckless endangerment, to me, that's almost like prima facie. Like that's exactly.
Well, couldn't he say, because it seems to me that the crux of this whole case comes down to who failed to strap him in correctly. This kind of problem was well known to the department. The department had been sued for these rough rides many times, has paid out, if I'm not mistaken, millions of dollars before. So it was definitely a policy that you have to tie people down so that they're not flailing and sliding around during the ride.
But there's a difference between intentionally not tying someone down and intending to hurt somebody.
Well, first, I think the driver is going to face quite a bit of heat because I understand that it was an erratic maneuver during the drive because there was somebody else in the van for at least part of the ride, somebody else that had been arrested. So the driver being one part of that equation about how rough the ride was. But the other part is, for sure, you have to restrain somebody in the back of a police vehicle.
And each officer would be culpable because it's all of their duties to do so.
So is that automatic, or does
the fact that they've been sued before, that so you know that there's protocol and measure that have been taken inside the department because of that, and so that's where you clearly show the gross negligence that's taken place.
But
because
does he get to say, well, I was the last one to get there.
Doesn't matter.
Whose job is it to tie him securely into the van?
I haven't read the police code in full, but from what I did see, it was every officer has that responsibility. Now, if there's any part to the code that says the sergeant is the one that must do so, then obviously they'll be more culpable than the others on these charges.
So trying to point the finger and be like, I thought so-and-so was going to do it, so-and-so thought that other person was going to do it, that is not going to be a defense, you don't think?
As far as I know regarding the code, no. So.
All right. Okay, so then if that's the case, then I'm expecting some pretty simple convictions here. I understand that the trial is expected to last about 2 weeks, and we will definitely bring you the verdict and any development on that. All right, Shaka, you have some words from our sponsor.
Yes, DraftKings. Your season-long fantasy football team may be going strong, but you don't have to wait until week 16 to get paid. 1 week fantasy means no season-long commitments. Got an injured player? No problem. It's like a new season every week, so you're never stuck with the same players. And get this, DraftKings is crowning a new millionaire every week this season. You could turn your love of football into a life-changing payday. This isn't fantasy as usual, this is DraftKings. Welcome to the big time. Hurry to DraftKings.com now and use promo code BLACK to play free for a shot at $1 million in this week's Millionaire Maker event. Enter BLACK for free entry now at DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com.
All right, great. Thank you so much for that. Now, something that I wish was a fantasy, but certainly is not, is this Planned Parenthood shooting in Colorado that happened.
Speaking of domestic terrorism.
Right. So, right, should this, I did not see that he had been charged with that. It was first-degree murder, but again, no domestic. And is this a hate crime against women?
Of course, it's a hate crime. I mean, he's sending a political message here. That's really what's going on here, especially at this date and time, where we have these big controversies over whether abortion should be allowed or not.
Has he been charged yet?
Yes.
He has been charged.
He was in court yesterday, kind of. His eyes were closed half the time, so I don't know if this is like his attempt to look incompetent, but he did appear in court. He's actually being defended by one of the public defenders who was on the team for James Holmes, the guy who shot the Aurora movie theater. Don't want to have that guy's job. But, I mean, it's very necessary in our system that we have a public defender who would do that work. So thank you, Guy, for doing that, because I definitely would not want to be defending Robert Louis Deere, who went to the Planned Parenthood and killed a police officer and a mother and an Iraq War veteran. 3 people killed. Why no? Do we think maybe hate or domestic terrorism charges will be added on later, or probably not?
I mean, whether they'll be added on or not, I can't say. I think they should.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So the judge told him that he's facing a minimum penalty of life and a maximum penalty of death if he's convicted. I mean, I'm generally not for the death penalty, and I've made the prediction on this show that within the next 10, 20 years, I think the Supreme Court is going to say that the death penalty is not constitutional. But in this case, I feel like that's not enough. You killed a police officer who was on duty, who knew of it, there was an active shooting situation, who went in knowing full well the danger that he faced and gave his life in order to help save the people who were inside. This was Officer Swayze, who was a husband and father of 2 children, and then, the other 2 civilians. How can we? What do you think would allow for you to feel that justice was done in this case?
Well, I mean, I don't believe that. Again, to second you, I'm not a believer in a death penalty. In fact, I think it reduces the pain that one would suffer if they would have had to suffer life in prison under whatever conditions.
I think we should make him
be.
volunteer at an abortion clinic for the rest of his life.
Oh, wow. I don't want him nowhere near abortion clinic.
Well, I think when it comes to justice here in this case, I think we're looking at like a systemic issue. So we know that Planned Parenthood wants to now sue the group that made the deceptive videos of them looking like they're selling baby parts, and that Carly Fiorina reiterated that statement during one of the debates.
Right.
And I think the systemic issue is people trying to, especially when you come to the national debate stage, and her trying to appeal to a certain base, and these people who are kind of ideologues making these deceptive videos. When the guy that was arrested talked about why he did this, he mentioned baby parts, and it's a term that goes right back to the videos and back to Miss Fiorina. And I think that's the issue here is allowing people to be looked at in a false light and then publicizing that message.
Right.
And so I think you have 2 people here, those that publicize the message and those that that the group that's now being targeted in terms of a lawsuit on
I mean,
behalf of Planned Parenthood.
I want like real-time fact-checking on these debates,
Yeah.
because then when Carly Fiorina was looking into the camera
Yeah.
very intensely saying, watch those videos and you will see exactly this, that, and the other, and then the truth is that's not what you see in those videos. If like a large bubble had come over the screen that
Right.
said what she is saying is absolutely not true, that may have made a difference. So real-time fact-checking, can we get this? And perhaps that would be just Carly Fiorina saying, sorry, and I hope I had no part in inspiring this monster to do what he did.
Yeah, because anyone watching that statement that she made, if you weren't going to go do your own fact checking, you'd believe her. She looked credible.
Yeah.
You know, the former CEO of Hewlett Packard. You know, so she has that look where, as an average American, if I'm not going to go do any more research, I'm going to believe what she said because she convinced me of it. She was very convincing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what we all have to. We all have to have that the onus upon us to go look further.
Exactly.
But the media needs to really be a little bit more responsible about the way they're portraying these things.
So you mentioned that Planned Parenthood plans to sue this group that put together these deceptive videos that made it look like Planned Parenthood was illegally selling baby, parts and tissues. What would they sue for? We were brainstorming up a whole list of them.
Well, I think you have false light,
Right.
tortious business interference. So I think there are definitely claims they can make with regards to these videos. And I don't know.
Defamation, libel, perhaps.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it was legal for them to be videoing Planned Parenthood.
Right, because those recording
Invasion of privacy.
Yeah. And,
Right. So I think that there's a number of claims that could be made that would probably stick. I would love to see massive punitive damages on this, because what we know is that videos that were taken were not all at Planned Parenthood. They were edited in such a way to make it appear that they were selling these parts, when what they're legally allowed to do is seek reimbursement for handling the tissue
Right.
that goes to research for medical conditions, illnesses, cancer, HIV, that we as a society say that we want. We want experimental, drugs and things, and some of them, we don't want to try them out on live humans, and so we use something that's close, and so that's why we use tissue in some cases. So I'm at a loss for why so many people believe these videos, and I also found it very fascinating that somebody, I can't remember who, said that this actually appears to be an attack, like a class warfare attack on poor women, because poor women are the ones that go to Planned Parenthood.
Exactly.
I really think that, we kind of talked about culture a little bit, but culture is really behind this, right? Because this guy's anti-government. So what does that mean, right? He wants to cut government services. Okay, so women are, the right to have abortions is removed from women. Well, then what? Now you have women who are having children, can't take care of them. Where are these children going to go? Who's going to take care of them?
Right.
And you want to cut government funding, so who's going to be affected? The children are going to be affected.
Right.
Because now there's no money for foster care for all of these children that have no home, or, fire departments take in children. Okay, there's no money for fire departments to take in children. I mean, the reality is that, policy shouldn't be made based on things that we would like to happen in the world. Like, nobody would like for women to accidentally get pregnant when they don't mean to get pregnant. But the reality is, biologically, if people in the world are going to have sex, which they will, women will get pregnant. So what happens then? If a woman is not ready to have a child, that is her individual choice to look at her life, look at her finances, look at her family, think about her body, think about her health and her mental health, and decide whether or not to bring a life into the world. Right?
I completely agree.
And I had one more thought, which is the justice issue that you raised. Like, what would justice look like for this man? And I think a lot about our prison system and our policing system, and that's violence, right? And I think that punishing this man with violence, it just plays into the investment that our country has decided to commit to just punishing people and policing people. What I think justice would look like maybe is making this guy volunteer at, I don't know, a foster home, work with children,
Although, who wants to put this
nobody,
man on?
okay, fine, that's a terrible idea. But you know what I'm saying?
I totally understand and appreciate the spirit.
Rehabilitative element.
Right,
of
okay, I
our
don't want
prison
him with
system.
children,
Yeah.
but...
Well, I mean,
Elderly, how about elderly maybe?
even then, I mean, the government can't do that. That's involuntary
But
servitude.
in our prison system, we can do rehabilitative things that are measured and may take a little bit more money, but at the end of the day will reduce cost overall.
Also, prisoners don't have, prisoners can be enslaved under the 13th Amendment.
That's true. That is true. I was going to add the fact that
Side note.
side note, right? No, but I was going to add the fact that, and in these circumstances, we're not talking about stripping or making it illegal to have an abortion. We're talking about government funding, and I completely agree this should be clearly the woman's choice. But what we're really talking about here, and this is what I was mentioning earlier, this is what we're talking about, and that's an attack on the lower classes. Because if there isn't government funding, well, the rich people who have money are not going to be affected. They're still going to have options with private doctors to go ahead and get their abortions. And so this is why my opinion is that this is clearly an attack on the lower classes, because these are the people that are going to be affected. These are the people that are going to be forced to have those children, and they don't want to. And now we'll see the economical effects trickling down from that.
Oh man, not a great story. I kind of feel bad that we had such a show full of really intense sad stories, but we appreciate you tuning in to become educated and informed and hear our perspective on these stories. And we actually have one more time, but we are fully out of time. So we're going to have to bring our other story that I was really looking forward to bringing you next week. Please come back, join us here on Justice is Served. Thank you to my co-hosts for being here today.
Kevin Undergaro, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, and the entire BHL staff, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us. info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I am the official voice of Black Hollywood Live, Scipio. Instagram me at KingXOBay. Thanks for tuning in. The views expressed here are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.